This is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Helen Gretchen Jones. You're an intuitive death doula, channeler, guiding souls with compassion and spiritual wisdom. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you today?
Doing pretty good. So I'm happy that you're joined us on the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast. This is our first interview, and we do have your URL below that will be clickable for anybody who wants to follow up with you. That's www.helengretchenjones.com. So that will be clickable within the podcast description. At the moment, we're live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. A couple of things I always ask any guest before we get into like the depth of your story. What motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
I think I'm motivated most by learning something new. Every time I sit with one of my patients or have an experience that's brand new, I just light up from the inside out, and I just want to keep exploring.
That's your. What made you want get into this field? Did you feel this early in life that you had this capability?
So I've always had a connection to spirit and being able to perceive energies around me. And so that probably helped lead me to this field of being a death doula. But a death doula is a relatively new profession or niche place to fill in society. Before, a lot of times nurses would sit with patients, and with our changing healthcare system here in the US, nurses have a lot of additional paperwork that they have to do and less time to sit bedside. And so that's where the death doula now can come in and sit.
Yeah, it's important because I guess everybody gets tapped out because there's so much work and not enough resources. So now there's people outside of like the typical provider network, people going toward, coaches and maybe holistic medicine and other types of practices because the traditional system is kind of maxed out.
Absolutely, that's correct. Yes.
So as a death doula, maybe you can kind of describe like what a doula is, and then what a death doula is, and maybe the differences that you bring to your role.
Sure. So most people have heard of a birth doula. A doula is simply a word that means to assist or to guide, to help. And so there's now death doulas or end of life doulas, and they're people who sit and help patients and families as the patient transitions from this world to the next. It's just helping the family to find peace, helping the patients to find peace, answering any questions that might come up, kind of going with the flow of things and kind of trying to sort. Every single circumstance is different, of course, but trying to sort through family dynamics and help everyone to come to terms and to find closure in the final moments.
That's really it's an interesting topic because I never even thought about. I believe I had a doula with my wife and my daughter. I only have one daughter. Then we had a doula for that experience. But this experience is kind of a new concept for me. And interesting enough, like I had somebody in my life, somebody I knew when I was young, had a crush on, and then I suddenly found out that he died like last year. And I felt like I didn't realize how much it would hit me to find out that they actually, died. And it kind of hit me out of nowhere. That I was like, wow, I'm really being affected by the fact that this person is no longer here. And I was like, wow, I wonder how I could find out more because for some reason I couldn't get a lot of information because the family was like very private about like what happened. So there's
Mm-hmm.
like no information on it and nobody want to talk about it. So I'm like, wow, it's like I have no way to figure out, or feel what happened to this person.
Right. Now you don't have as much closure as maybe
Yeah.
you felt like you needed. That can be very, very hard. When a family is private like that, of course, we respect their privacy, but it can be very difficult for the family and for surviving friends to not have that closure, to not have that ability to process what happened on their own and kind of grieve with a fuller understanding of that person's life and death. So that would be one of the things that a death doula could assist with before the family transitions, before the patient transitions with the family.
Yeah, because that seems like sometimes people get, shame or they're very private about what happened. Like so you have no idea. Friends kind of get closed off. Like if you're not in the circle, then you have no idea. And you want to connect, but then like they won't let you. Then you're like, okay. So
That's
it's like,
hard because I am working along people to teach people to be vulnerable and to live in a moment of non-judgment and to not feel shame around the different ways that the human decides to leave the earth. There shouldn't be a lot of shame around choices that people make. They are choices. And that was the choice that they made based on how they were processing their life at that time. And it's okay. It really is. And if we can
mhm.
help people to recognize that we love that person, regardless of how they exited the world, and there's no shame, there's no judgment, and it's all about understanding and what we can learn from that. That's what I really hope to do when I'm sitting with patients who have sitting with families who have had a patient transition in not so ideal circumstances.
Yeah, because a lot of times, with the COVID pandemic, sometimes, people died and people didn't want to say it was COVID.
Yeah,
So they kind of not want to reveal it. It's like, so then you're like, well, okay, what happened? Nobody wants to talk about it. So you have no idea. So you're like,
that too. Yes. Most of my shame, patients who have transitioned where the family has shame, has been around drug overdoses and attempted suicides that lingered. They didn't die right away before they
mhm,
transitioned. Those things tend to have a lot of stigma
yeah,
still in our
stigma on it.
society.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
I was so surprised that in the case of like the COVID situation, it seemed to have like the same kind of stigma as a
Yeah.
suicide or something or drug overdose. And you're like, why? It's like
Right.
cancer. It's like if you had a heart attack, if you're a diabetic and you died of a diabetic coma, it's like what's the difference?
Right.
But it was kind of more political maybe. But
Probably.
yeah, if it's like, okay, you don't want to admit it. So I was like, okay, fine, fine, fine. But you have a book, Healing Whispers from Spirit Guides. And what made you want to take what you do and put it into the book?
Honestly, I so I have a team in spirit. I call them a team. They're just beings that are non-physical that are very helpful and help me through my own challenges in life. And they're the ones one morning that suggested that I would be writing a book. I have had zero interest in writing a book. I never have ever felt qualified enough to write a book, but I did it. It took me a little over 2 years, and I learned so much through the process. I learned a lot about myself, even.
Hmm.
But now I'm so grateful it's out there. I love getting emails from people telling me how much it's helped them understand the experiences that some of their loved ones have shared at bedside before they transitioned and how it's given them hope. And so I think that's sort of the point of it, to recognize that life is eternal, that these experiences happening bedside are hopeful, and that the goodbye is not the final goodbye. It's a see you
Yeah,
later.
yeah. Well, I'm a Buddhist, so we believe that you continue in
Yes,
in different forms, so it's never really over. But some people might have a different perspective. It might be over in this plane to them, but maybe not in
right.
the next plane or the next phase. But it's interesting, like you say, you were able to take all those stories and have like people get a window into what it is to be a death doula from your book. Is that get like a window into it?
Yes, absolutely. I share my favorite patient stories so far, where they've been very transformative experiences for me. I've had shared death experiences with some of them. These patients are wise and they have the opportunity to teach before they transition. Some of the most beautiful, amazing, unifying experiences that I've ever had are happening at the bedside with these patients. And they come from all walks of life, all different religious backgrounds, different cultural beliefs and traditions, and they are the most fascinating individuals. However, there seems to be a lot of similarities that are happening at the bedside, regardless of how you chose to live your physical life or the family that you were born into.
Hmm.
So it has been such a learning experience for me.
Yeah, the similarity. Well, we're all humans, so there's probably some common. And a lot of people put themselves in different camps, but like once you get to some common or shared human experiences, because everybody's gonna leave this plane at some point.
Yes.
And so the idea. is a lot of people are kind of wary of it. Some people kind of become accepting of it if they run its course. You know, I'm a cancer survivor, and I was like at one point I didn't know I was going to survive, so I was kind of making my peace. Like, well, if it goes this way, I'm like it's okay. But like if you a lot of people don't want to think about mortality, or they don't want to think about when they get to that point. And so is that part of what you do with people who are at that point to start to maybe make it ease that I mean I guess anxiety.
Yes. So I have found that when people are diagnosed, my experience so far anyway, is that when people are first diagnosed with a terminal condition, they move into, they're devastated often, and they move into trying to fight it and fix it and what can I do, and they go through all the steps to try to get better. When that isn't working and it becomes clear that they aren't going to get better and that this is their journey towards leaving their physical body, they go through a process of grief and denial, even, and finally acceptance. But whenever they're in the acceptance mode, they sometimes, this is when fear can set in. They feel fearful over what's going to happen now that there's no way out, or they fear like there's no way out. So now they're like, am I going to be in pain? What's going to happen when I die? What's going to happen after I die? What's going to happen to my family? And all these fears set in. So a death doula comes in and can navigate those waters a little bit, help put the patient at ease, can discuss what to expect through the dying process. I take it a step further because I have experiences with spirit and being able to see spirit, so I can move that direction. Oftentimes, I will see their family who have already transitioned standing bedside with them. I will see beings of light, which validates their experiences of seeing beings of light at bedside. So I go a little further than maybe some other death doulas by doing a
Hmm.
spiritual part of it where I can validate what they're seeing. Um, in addition to that, though, I'm helping the families to navigate that, to say what they need to say at the end. So it's so important that if a patient can close their eyes and feel like, if I don't ever open them again, which is a common fear, have I said and done everything today where I feel really good about closing my eyes tonight? And that's sort of the goal of a death doula. But you don't have to have a death doula to say those goodbyes,
Yeah.
to say everything you need to say. So it's my goal now with this book to normalize talking about death, to normalize talking about spiritual experiences at the bedside, and to normalize being vulnerable. So many
Yeah.
people put their walls up because they want to be the rock, the person that's holding it all together, and that's not the time to do it. The bedside is not the time to be, you know, firm and steady and not letting a single tear drop. It's okay to open up and let your loved ones know how you're really feeling. And it lets them open up too. Crying is not a bad thing.
Well, vulnerability like is kind of like the wheelhouse of I'm a creative person. I'm a musician. Creativity with the podcast and different things I do. And what I've always known is like vulnerability is my secret sauce. Like
Mm,
as a writer, like any kind of writer I've ever talked to, is like the vulnerability of able to like have this like looking glass self that you look into, you dive into, you deal with the things that are uncomfortable, and you might put layers on it by creating a character, but a lot of that is you or
yes.
different versions of yourself and all the characters in your stories. But you have to challenge yourself to say, well, what do I am not good at, or what do I have that's like an issue, and maybe I should explore like why is it an issue? Like why am I triggered this way? Why? Then you
Yes.
can kind of try to work through it, and it's cathartic. Sometimes as a musician, it doesn't go into words; it goes into notes.
Mm,
Like so as a painter, it goes into the brushes on your painting, and as an actor, it goes into the way you do your performance. But a lot of times, people have these walls where they don't like being vulnerable. Like you said, they stay of rock, and like there's all this stuff going on. But like if you waited till you're at that moment at death's door to be vulnerable, like maybe you should live your life trying to be a little bit more vulnerable with your family and your loved ones, so they really know you.
yes. And we know my husband and I, we have been teaching our kids to say I love you all the time. And now we've got this 19-year-old and this 13-year-old who are always saying love you, bye. And they say it to their friends, they say it to our neighbors, they say it to everybody. And it's so funny because if I had accidentally said love you, bye to a neighbor, I would have been mortified as a kid. And my kids, they're so available emotionally through our teachings that they don't even think twice. Why is it a bad thing to say I love you to someone? Even if it's your neighbor or your friend, like, why does it have to be reserved to only family? So I've been watching this unfold, and I'm just like, I just love their free spirit with just I love yous everywhere. I wish that was happening more. But yeah, so even now when we're dealing with people who are terminally ill, oftentimes they're older, in their 80s and 90s, and they're coming from a different time, a time where there were gender roles, a time when there were, men weren't supposed to cry and men had to hold it together. And many of them experienced war. And
Mm-hmm.
so they're breaking some of those stereotypes and barriers can be difficult, but we got to start somewhere.
Yeah, it's hard to, when you had that kind of conditioning from like your microcosm of your family, like great grandpa did this, everybody in the family had, they always just, you know, stick, like just hold it in,
Yeah,
just
they
to
do.
stay in control. And that's kind of like the mindset. And my pop was like that, he's no longer here, but he came from that kind of perspective, and grandpa was the same way. It says over time, the rest of the children, we started to realize like, well, you can't really, that's what grandpa and grandpa did, great grandpa did, but like we maybe don't want to follow that.
Well, and that was a different time too, where people were trying to still survive. We are now to a point in our country and in our economy where most people don't have to struggle to survive. They could start to build on the foundations that were set before them, and they can start to thrive. So it's easier to allow some of your emotions and feelings to be honored because you're not just trying to make things happen and survive on a daily basis like our ancestors before us.
Yeah, so it's even like trying to stay safe though. I find this, I
Yes.
always have this conversation about the wolf at the door. Like
Yes.
there's a lot of people who have a wolf at the door, but it's not a physical wolf at the door. It's kind of like it's this emotional wolf at the door. And
Yes.
and you're still trying to feel safe. And so you feel unsafe if you get triggered by like a word, you get triggered by like a situation. And it feels just like if that wolf was chasing you around out in the woods. But
Yeah.
it's not. But if your body and your mind feel like it is.
Yes. Absolutely.
And so like today is like you could be like have all these assets and you're still triggered by the wolf at the door.
We'll say we still have work, don't we? We still have work to do on ourselves.
Yeah. So like what you're talking about with that compassion, which I think is a common theme like in life. But at this point, like when you're at death in a death doula, like the idea of compassion, because it's like they made the grace
Mm.
to actually, be in that moment and not try to prejudge it or think the way it should be, and kind of maybe understand like when you're in this moment, start to be in it. So I don't know how you want to address maybe your techniques for that.
Yes. So I'm very much when I'm working. Well, I mean, it would be nice if I did this all the time, but very much when I'm present with my patients, and I don't think about, what I need to do after I leave the hospital room or the nursing home. Everyone's got dinner and laundry and pick up everyone's got their chores that they have to do, but I really try to set that all aside when I walk in to sit with a patient. But more than that, compassion. My team in spirit would sit when I do my meditations, would share, and it's very wise, is to put yourself in that person's shoes, and not to put your person in your shoes, not to be in their shoes to see what you would do different or how you would change things or what you would do to fix something. It's just be in their shoes, and that's it. Just try to understand what they're going through and not try to analyze how they got there or where they're going. What are they feeling right now? And what can you do to support them? So when I'm sitting with patients, I am thinking constantly about what they're going through, how I can be of service, and nothing else in that in that moment matters except
Hmm.
for how I can serve them.
So it's more like empathetic rather than trying to have like your own. Because a lot of times people will go get advice from their friends, and it's kind of like what they would do, rather than
Right.
did they actually listen to what you're saying and process it and not throw the lens. I'm like, well, I would handle it like ABC, rather than like, did you actually hear what your friend said, and do you understand their point of view rather than imposing your point of view?
And that can be really hard to do because I think even as a kid, when we're taught to be in someone else's shoes, we're always thinking about what we would do differently, how we would change things. But what if we were to just be and try to understand exactly what they're feeling and not try to fix it, not judge it, don't try to change it for them, just be with them. And that can be really, really hard because as humans, our goal is to work through change, to create new things, to
Or to fix it?
manage things, to help people find happiness. And if they're miserable, you want to fix it for them.
Yeah.
Instead, this is a time to let them process their own emotions and feelings and to just be present for them.
So it seems like the listening part of it, like a lot of people in terms of listening skills, they're listening to the word and then they're thinking of they're not well, they might not actually be listening to what they're hearing. They're thinking of their response
Always. It just
in the
seems like
middle
all
of
the
it
time.
instead of actually listening to it all the way through and getting the full picture. They maybe hear a trigger and say, "Well, and so they just focus on the trigger, and then they're not really listening to anything else that's being said. And so it's really kind of that listening skill, which I don't know if people are kind of retraining their mind to like have that because it helps in a lot of different scenarios when you actually learn how to listen.
Well, and it's also interesting because we talked a little while ago about the 80 and 90-year-old men who are really trying hard, to be stoic and strong in a moment. They don't want to be a burden. I have found that women of the same age, they struggle with feeling heard. Throughout their whole lives, they've struggled feeling heard, it seems, and they don't feel acknowledged in the way that they felt that
Mhm.
they deserved. And so that listening brings up that. If we are teaching our younger generations now to truly listen, then people can feel heard and feel seen without all that anger behind it when they're finally heard and seen. So I deal with that even with older patients.
Mhm. Yeah, because that makes sense because like different roles, gender roles,
Yes.
where a lot of times people didn't really even listen because they're like, oh, they don't value what you're saying. So if you don't value what the other gender says because you're kind of taught that, well, it doesn't really matter. So I can have my own idea about what it should be because I'm supposed to be at the top of the pyramid and I'm like, I'm making the judgment.
Right.
So if it doesn't fall within my wheelhouse of what I understand, well, then I don't need to hear it because it should just be whatever it's supposed to be.
Right. Whatever I say goes.
Yeah, which is kind of a narrow mindset, but that could be what you're dealing with that age group that you were mentioning.
Mhm.
Um, so I was just wondering in terms of this idea of a science club in your book and how it relates to like spirituality and the afterlife, because science just counterintuitively you're like, well, science is kind of like is it in the same wheelhouse as spirituality? Because science is always trying to prove something, trying trying to prove it with facts. And spirituality more be like more trusting or faith. Like, is there kind of a different kind of coming together those both of those ideas?
I think more and more we are seeing that there are a lot of scientific studies and researchers out there who are studying consciousness and the brain and even the heart. So there's some really great studies out there that are starting to merge the two fields. I do have Science Club in the book. I I'm unsure how that's going to continue to unfold. There are a group of beings who are deceased scientists who show up in a meditation sometimes with me and give me information in which to look up and then correlate how it relates to spiritual experiences that I've had at the bedside of patients, or even if it's not at the bedside of patients. But I utilize their teachings to help me grasp a stronger foundation for spirituality. My husband is not a very spiritual man. He's very much fact oriented. And so he really appreciates the information that Science Club brings through, because I think he maybe needs that a little bit more than I do.
Hmm.
So it was actually a man. The first time it happened was it was a scientist. His name is Paul Dirac. I didn't know who he was. I now know he's won some Nobel prizes. Like, he was kind of a big deal in his field at some point. Um, and I'm sure in the realm of physics, people know the name, but I certainly did not.
Hmm.
And he comes through and kind of leads the pack a little bit. And I just kind of group them all as a collective and call them Science Club, because I really am not good with names. I don't think it matters to them. They've already left these physical bodies. It's really the message that they're coming through with that matters more. So I do.
So,
I am merging a little bit of science and spirituality there.
well, it makes sense because once you start getting the theoretical science, then it starts to get into the same kind of space
Yes,
because you get into really experimental physics, and there's a lot of stuff that's, well, it's not black and white.
that's right.
There's a lot of gray, and there's a lot of stuff that's like unknown, and you're testing things, and you have to. It kind of opens up the ideas like, well, there is some level of spirituality, and I do know a lot of scientists that do have religious foundations because it's like when they look at the structure, it's like this structure is so interesting in our universe. It's like it doesn't seem like it just was made out of came out of nowhere.
Right.
It seems like
Right.
there's a design, like this idea of grand design, and so
Well
there
said.
becomes like connections where like you don't have to be in opposition to fact based concepts to understand that you can have a merging of both spiritual and science.
Definitely. Yes. And that's what Science Club, I think, is bringing to the book and bringing to my life. And it does encourage me to continue looking up other researchers who are doing work in the field of merging the two. And I find it absolutely fascinating and validating.
So, like going back to when you were a kid and you were having experiences with spirit, how did it make you feel when people like understood you or did not understand your what you were going through? Did it make you feel kind of like you're an outsider, or did you just feel like, okay, I feel this, so I'm not going to push it down?
I think a lot of people feel like outsiders throughout their life at some point. That seems to be a common part of growing up. I would see spirit. I would hear information come through in my head because I don't believe other people were hearing it. And I would say something out loud, and my family would they would they would be kind of turned off by it, kind of like, that's a little out there, and it wasn't welcomed. I
Mm.
remember seeing a being at the foot of my bed when I was 12 or 13, and I woke up the next morning and told my parents, and I felt safe and totally was wowed by the experience. And my dad told me, I believe you believe that's what you saw. And I was so disheartened. And it was at that time that I realized that while I never questioned the transformative experience of seeing the being and sharing that wisdom with that person, it did make me question the wisdom of my parents, because I knew it was real. I knew it was true. It really resonated with me. And I thought, if they don't know this, what else do they not know? And so
Yeah.
at an early age, it separated me from my parents, and I decided to keep certain things to myself. They had their own paths to go down as well. And so I think it probably served us all for me to kind of just experience my own things and keep it private for a while.
What's a way to keep it, to stay in it without pushing it down? Because like you could have a different response where the parents make you push it down, and you don't even explore it anymore, but you kept on at least having this for yourself
Yes,
as
I
something,
stayed open to it. Yeah.
which is, it's always, I don't know, it's a positive thing. It happens with like artists. It's like sometimes people like don't like the fact that you're an artist, and they say, well, they're not going to make money at that. They don't encourage that. They don't want you doing that, so you can't really share too much of it if with people that don't think it's valued. They don't value what you're into or your capabilities. So then you have to like, okay, well, this audience doesn't value. Maybe this other audience does. Does I find this other tribe of people that understand what I'm doing?
I've never thought of it that way, but Absolutely true. I suppose I've always kicked myself a little bit thinking, why didn't I speak up more and own my truth a little bit more as a kid? But you're right. I might have been swayed by other people's opinions because they did matter to me. They're my family and my parents, and it may have
Mhm.
sent me down a different path. Uh, huh. I like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. No, I brought that up, but how you respond to things is like it's all individuals, like different paths you get in front of you, like the fork in the road.
Yeah.
You go this way, you go that way. You don't know what's
Huh.
gonna happen. But in terms of like having this, your book talking about forgiveness, which I think I've been a common theme when I've talked to a lot of therapists or people who are in that space. Um, can you maybe talk about like the emotional impact of people trying to find, I guess, peace through forgiveness in your experience?
So forgiveness is something that's always been pushed by not just my grandmother, for example, but also from my team in spirit. And then I found when I was writing the book that I had a friend and some other people as well who were very triggered by the word forgiveness. It was something that they feel very uncomfortable even using the word.
Hmm.
Um, they are people who have been victimized by others, and in their way of processing it, the word forgiveness feels to them like they have to be okay in some way with what the experience was, what happened to
Hmm.
them. So we can use other words like, unburdening or releasing or letting go of, and really it's sort of the same process. But I think forgiveness is one of the most important things that we can do for ourselves by allowing whatever happened on any level to just say, I don't agree with what happened. I don't like what happened. I will never, ever say that it's okay. But what I can do is lay it down and not wear the badge of this happened to me and now I'm going to let this shape my entire future. I'm going to stop that. This happened to me and now I'm going to set it aside. I've learned from it. I will continue to learn from it, but I'm not going to let it define who I am currently or who I will be moving forward. And that's really what forgiveness does, is it lets you, the person, let go of any hurt and pain that might be stifling your forward movement. It doesn't mean you forget it, but it certainly means you don't allow it to shift the quality of your life moving forward.
Yeah, if you kind of stick in a grievance mode and you don't move beyond it, then you get like a feedback loop
Yes,
where if you like a lot of times as an artist, we try to it's very cathartic for me to go through all those things and then turn it into art. And then once I process it, then I kind of let it go. I let it be. And I dived into it, but now I can move on. Because I processed it. I didn't like just keep on thinking about it. I actually found a way to express it or dive into it and figure it out, however I decide to figure it out. But then it allows me to kind of move from that movement and not be stuck in like a loop, like I said. But
I like the way you said that, to let it be. Sometimes even letting it go, people are like, well, I don't want to fully let it go. This happened to me, but let it be is a really good way to say that.
yeah, because I mean, it happened. You can't like paper over it. But if you can let it be, and like you said, you're not okay if something really negative happened. And something like the idea of forgiveness, people say, well, you're saying like somebody did something really beyond the pale, and you're saying it's okay. Like, no, I'm not saying it's okay.
Right.
I'm saying I'm moving beyond it, and that person could have had a lot of reasons to put them there, and it still made it not valid that they did something that affected me or somebody else. But at least like you can understand some aspects of it and have some grace and move ahead,
Definitely.
which is hard because I think a lot of people have societal, like structures, like they make it hard for you to say that because there's right and there's wrong, it's black and white, and then if you how do you address that? You want to say, well, this is bad, so I'm gonna hang on to it because like I'm just gonna stay. That's like that's what it is. It's like, well, how do you process that?
Well, it's considered bad or good based on our current societal structures. In the 1300s or, in 2700, it may not be the same rules and regulations that guide our moral standards.
Yeah, yeah. Just every time change. The world we live in adapts, and like what was in, like you said, 1600s, 1700s is not what it is now. But somebody wants to hold on to that
Right.
because it's like, well, that's the canon. That's the structure, and I believe that structure is right. Well, it's 21st century,
Right.
so it's like you can want to do that, and I guess you want to live that way, but you might not be that happy living that way.
Most
You
likely won't be. Right.
Yeah, yeah, you're not gonna be in a good spot because like even when you're near the end, it's like you're still holding on to all these resentments. If you can't push beyond it, if you can't start to have some grace for yourself and other people, then you're gonna be like tortured. Do you really want to be that tortured person? Are you gonna be able to to actually move to the next phase if you're still holding on?
Mm. I see that at some of my patients do really, really want to hold on to that resentment to the bitter end. I do see that on occasion.
And some cultures might think that you might stay as a ghost and not be able to cross, that you never that you kind of get stuck in one realm in between because you haven't resolved it. So if you can't resolve, then you get kind of made to stay in the place where you didn't resolve it.
I'm not sure how that works. I do know that my experiences so far suggest that when we die, we quite literally focus elsewhere. It's like we just pop out of our bodies. Our consciousness or our soul maybe isn't trapped inside our bodies the way we think they are. It's a little bit more all encompassing out here as well. And when they transition, or we transition, it is just maybe focusing in a different level. We vibrate, or our frequency, the molecules of our body move at a different rate. And so we are still here. We're just moving at a different rate and resonating with other molecules moving at that rate, so that this table that I'm sitting in front of, or this microphone that's right in front of me, are moving at a different rate that resonates with my physical body now, but won't resonate with my spiritual body once I leave this focus. But it's
Mm.
still right here, right now. So when that happens, there does seem to be, with the people who are transitioning, there does seem to be a welcome home party. There does seem to be a new awareness of, or I should say, a fuller awareness of love and non-judgment, and this sense of expansiveness and freedom. So even in that moment, if you're going to hold on to those resentments up until that last breath, at some point your focus is going to be where you have a new awareness. It has never been my experience so far that someone gets stuck somewhere.
Oh,
Not yet.
well, yeah, that's interesting. That's your experience because this is something I guess that's out there. I actually have talked to some people that have that idea, but it could be everybody has a different view, and you've been physically working, in this space, so you that's your experience. So it's like you relay what's happened. So
That's my experience. I have heard people talk about stuck souls, and they go in and they do soul retrievals and all sorts of different things. It has never been something that I have witnessed. Yeah.
Well, yeah, if you think about the idea of like frequency or the like law of attraction, sometimes you get like your vibe might not attract that.
Maybe not.
So then
That's true.
if you don't attract it, then it doesn't get pulled into your wheelhouse because like that's not where you're vibrating. You're vibrating in these other places, and people are more expansive. People actually transition, and that's kind of like the law of attraction. Because if you're like the idea of it, like if I keep on going into codependency, then I'm probably gonna stay in codependency. I might be triggering a vibe that's what I bring around me because that's the key I'm in. That's like the tune I'm playing. And so once you realize that you don't have to be in that key, then maybe you get somewhere else. But sometimes people don't ever figure out how to actually kind of reframe it.
And that's when people who do maybe soul retrievals and whatever it is that they're doing to help people who are stuck, maybe, I mean, there's that's the best part about being human, is that we get to co-create this world with other humans, and we get to experience all the challenges and all the joys, all of it, and everything that we choose to focus on. That's what we create. It's kind of the best. I mean, it's amazing to be here.
Oh yeah, that's the well, being a cancer survivor, I think that you get a appreciation for life that sometimes it's hard. Life is hard, but once you survive something like that, um what happens is you start to realize, like, if I can do that, then I can do this, right? And then you start to realize that the glass ceilings you put on yourself, or just like these limitations, like you're not done until you're done, right? And even then, you're
Mhm.
really not done. As a Buddhist, like, I'm done in this area, but I'm not done in the next area. So you're never really over. But some people are say, well, it's over because they didn't hit this goal. And then
Mm.
and then it's like, well, like, you're not giving yourself enough grace to realize, like, it's never over. On the continuum, it's actually really never over because you're continually phasing. So the idea that you're over, like, you got to let that go.
You're right. Yes.
But, like, in order to have a voice, though, you mentioned, like, some of the older women you were talking to maybe didn't feel they had a voice.
Mhm.
So, like, when you have an experience with people, like, and you actually allow them to have that voice, like, what's that like?
It actually brings a lot of self reflection for them. Whenever I sit with a person who feels like they've never really been heard, and suddenly someone sees them and hears them, they usually start to say things that are vulnerable. At first, they don't. And then they start to move into that more emotional state. And then it allows them to really reflect on how they allowed, I see this many times actually, how they allowed themselves. Maybe it wasn't someone else who put that expectation on them, how they basically shifted themselves to allow that to happen by doing it to themselves. They didn't speak up.
Mm,
When I have patients who are finally feeling heard and finally feeling seen, and their families around, because sometimes I deal when the families aren't around, but when their families are also around, it is the most magical things. They come up with the most beautiful, heartfelt, poetic things to say, and they're saying it on such a deep level that they're not being interrupted. It's not talking about the mashed potatoes and jello that the nursing home is serving them. They start to say some of the most incredible, beautiful, you are the best daughter. The moment I saw you when you were born, this is how I felt. And I was so proud of you when you did this. And you are one of my greatest joys in life. And I can't imagine God sending me your way and not allowing me to see you again after this. Some of the most incredible, heartfelt
mhm.
things that are just like,
Really important. Yeah.
oh, yeah.
Well, that's like, to be able to have that communication with family and friends is like, it's really important. But a lot of times, like I said, you hope people don't wait until this moment in their life to do that. But if that's the moment where it happens, then that's the way that life was going.
Yeah.
Um, but if it happens, it's still beautiful. Like, beautiful moments that just, like, in the continuum, just somebody like, oh, you people always want something to happen, sooner. But sometimes it happens when it's ready to happen. Um, and it might happen at that moment because that's where it was going to happen. But it's really beautiful when you can facilitate that. If you're creating the environment that allows that to happen,
Right. Where
that's a
they
really
feel
cool
safe,
thing. Yeah,
where they
safe
feel
thing.
safe to be courageous and bold and just go ahead and say what's on their mind.
So
Yeah.
do people, like, keep a diary of what's going on in these moments, or do they record the moments by audio, or they just let it happen organically and don't, like, just have to be in a room?
I write these experiences down every time I go visit a patient. I keep track of, mostly for my own research. I try to understand what's happening. I try to look for similarities. I'm always seeking the truth, and I try to look through it, through a lens of the physical reality, but also through a spiritual one. I have only had a few patients who record on their phone the final moments. I have never seen anyone journaling anything while it was happening. I think that's because we live in a world of technology, right? So we could just hit
So
pink,
just
record on
turn
the
the voice
phone.
memo on,
Yeah,
just record it. Yeah, with because you can.
right.
So
It's too easy.
it's too easy. But yeah, it's well, being a writer, like if you write it, you somehow remember it different. At least like the process of writing to me is a connection thing that happens.
Yes.
But the technology is there, so people kind of lose that. But um, it's cool that they actually engage in recording it because I was wondering if that would be like something that people would say, "Well, I don't want to do that because it doesn't feel right." But
I suppose there are some people who would say, oh, that's kind of morbid, or she wouldn't want to be remembered this way, or whatever. I do see several people, though, record. Um, Even if their loved one's already unconscious, I see them recording. Some
mhm,
people are doing it just for their own. They want to remember it. They want to
remember record, yeah.
validate the experience. Yeah, they don't want to miss anything. Other people are actually looking for orbs of light or
Well, they're
any
trying to see
kind
if they
of
can find it, see it. If they
see
go
it.
back and look at it and say, "Can I actually see something
Right. That happens a
happening?"
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like why not try to engage and see what's going on? Because like with the technology today, you can run it through. Say, is there actually something coming through here with different light? Check different types of light, or is something happening? And
Sure.
analyze it.
But a lot of people also think of it as a really sacred moment and they look down upon that moment. But I don't
Mm.
think that there's anything wrong with recording it in any way or filming it in any way. I think it's loving
And
and
that
it
gets good.
helps that person. Huh?
Well, yeah, because you were talking about light and the beings of light. Maybe we can dive into the whole concept of encounters with beings of light. Can you maybe give some examples in your in your path where you've
Sure.
talked about it in your book, but maybe some more examples?
I had one patient, Mr. A. He was on hospice for 5 years and I was his volunteer for 4. And I came to love him like family. I mean, you do after 4 years of just being with someone. He was always seeing beings of light in his room. People, he was lonely. His family, his son lived in town, but he was had a family at home and he was working 9 to 5, and stopping off at the nursing home was like a chore, and it was easier to not go sometimes. And so it was, he really missed his family. And it became like after I would sit with him, I'd get up and leave. There would be a being of light that would sit in the chair that I just left from. That's what he would say. And I would secretly, I couldn't see them, but I would secretly thank them for being there for my friend because it made him not be lonely. And I have
Mm.
frequently found that when people are transitioning, they have these experiences with beings of light or angels or loved ones who have already gone before them because it eases their loneliness. It helps them realize that they're not going through this alone, even when they feel alone, and that everything's going to be okay. This isn't it. The 3D world is not it. So I actually find that the experiences where patients are having visions of beings of light, their transitions are much more peaceful and easy.
But it's very comforting to feel like your ancestors. If you think about, I'm a Native American in my background, like Cherokee and Blackfoot, and the idea like this spirit realm and the elders, they're gonna come to you. They come to you all the time, but they come to you at different moments in your life, and we expect that. We kind of look forward to that, and knowing that you're not going to be by yourself, where other people might not have a full understanding of that. They might believe, well, I'm going to go where the angels are. I'm going to go to whatever their spirit concepts are. And other people might have been like, oh, well, I'm more agnostic and I don't believe there's anything. So then they get real fearful when they're at that point. So if you run into people more agnostic and then they get hit with the reality of their, like, at the end of the journey, but now they never really believed there's something else.
So I guess my experience with, okay, so I think my, where should I go with that? Okay, so agnostic, they don't have a particular belief in anything, but oftentimes they think there's something, they just don't know what it is. Atheists have, like, I'm going to die and it's just going to be all black, like I'm going to sleep and there's absolutely nothing. So I have had
Mm,
many atheists who I've helped transition who did not actually experience beings of light. I think they were completely closed off to it. But while they did have fear, they were just ready to get it over with. So
mm,
their deaths were actually pretty easy. My agnostic people who did see beings of light, people who were like, I don't really know what's out there, probably something, but I don't know what, they were open to seeing beings of light. And so
mhm,
they would see a being of light, for example, or an angel. Oftentimes, these beings of light would tell them something and they would repeat it out loud. What? When did so and so get married? Like it would be something like something that could be validated, and the family were like, because they didn't want to say anything to them because they were missing it, they're or whatever, they were bedridden, and it would be sort of this validating experience, and then they would be like, oh, they did get married or whatever, and then the family would recognize that this person was having a connection to something or someone that was in the room right there that they couldn't see. And
mhm.
again, those moments make the person who is agnostic recognize that they're not alone, that there is something more. It almost seems to unfold so naturally, like a friend walking in the door, and you're like, oh, I remember now. And
Yeah,
then it
so it's
also gives the family hope.
not so rigid. It's more expansive. Like
Yes,
you might not, like, if you're shown something in that moment, then you're not going to disbelieve it.
right.
So then you're willing to, okay, now I see it, but up till then maybe I didn't see it. But like I'm not going to be so rigid that if I see it, it's like, well, that can't be.
Well, and they're not going to just be like, oh, darn, I wish I would have lived my life differently this whole time. Right now, they're feeling relief. They're like,
Yeah, good.
wow, here
It's
we go.
helping.
Yeah,
It's helping with the transition because then you're feeling like, well, now I'm, like you said, I'm not alone.
right,
That where I'm going is not just like the void of space
right.
where it's like there's all this blackness between the stars, and it's
Yeah.
like, well, there's nothing in there. There's something in there. It's energy, but you can't see it. But that's the thing. Is like, what? Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. It's like
Radio
even in the void,
waves, ultraviolet
even in the
light.
void, there's tons of stuff in the void.
Yeah,
People with the words like this is nothing, but it's like, no, there's never really nothing.
right,
But people will say, well, yeah, it's nothing. It's like you just have to open your mind to, like, it's not going to be as bad as maybe you were building up in your imagination that it's going to be terrible. And when you start to get some ease in that, like, oh, I'm not totally solitarily alone for the rest of my existence on some other plane. Is not going to be anything to look forward to. You get the, I think it just opens up. It's like, okay, I can transition without the fear.
yes. And my team in spirit said dying is actually really easy. It's not it's not hard at all. Being born is a lot harder. So
Yeah,
not to
that's
give
the hard
anyone
part.
another irrational fear for the future, but
Yeah.
coming back around, apparently that's a
Going
lot
back
harder.
around is probably harder. Like the next trip around is like this.
Yep,
Like when you got to transition like to the next life. It's like you're starting off as a kid again
yep.
or another being again. Like it's like, oh, I came back and now I'm a bird or I'm a bee or I'm a whale.
Whatever you're experiencing.
It's like, oh, this totally different. Like different form and different path. But it's all good. It's all in the universe. It's like the universe is like so expansive and so many things that we don't understand.
Yes.
I would hope that, when we transition, we start to get a little hint of an understanding.
I think we earn a little bit of wisdom through the process of transitioning, and we have a little bit of greater awareness, but in no way are we all knowing when we transition.
No, I think it's still progressive. Like it
Yeah.
would you progressively, maybe a little bit more than the last life, but not everything that you need to know. That you're not going to get it all. You're not going to get the big. You're not going to have the omniscient picture of everything. That's just not
And
in our
actually, I think
wheelhouse.
that's a big misconception. I meet a lot of people who are Christian, faith based, who really believe that they're going to, well, I guess when I die, I'll know all that. I mean, maybe, but most of the time, in my experience so far, is that you do not become all knowing when you leave the body.
Yeah, well, as a Buddhist, we think we just get into, we just get there by millimeters, by
Yes,
it's just move. It's a progression, but it's not. It's not immediate. It can take eons. It can take
right.
forever. Eternity, and it's still not there.
It gets to take forever. How exciting is that?
Yeah. But in terms of your book, like when did you publish the book? You said it took like 2 years.
Yes, and I published it in August, so it just
August.
came out.
So are you planning on doing any more books in this area, or is that like that took a lot of effort and you want to focus on other things?
So I used to think that, and now I feel that there's still some more teachings to share, some more wisdom to share. And so we'll just have to see how it unfolds. But I believe that there will be more books in the future. Probably collaborations. That's where I'm working right now.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Collaborations are always key
Yeah.
as an artist. Like it's always more interesting to work with a band than to do
Sure.
everything by myself. So it's like yeah, if you can collaborate with another author and come up with new ideas and or even a project, a group idea. So it's more group or another person.
Group. I was sort of thinking about having, I mean, if there's anyone listening who's had an experience around awakening, I wanted to simplify the word awakening. I've been sort of focusing on that. I think a lot of people think it's a big, huge aha moment instead of little small moments that lead to
Mm.
greater understanding. And so I thought, well, if everyone could share a chapter, and have like a collaboration of 30 people all sharing their little moment of awakening, that might be interesting. So, yeah.
Sounds like a plan. That's a good
Yeah.
idea. Well, yeah, it's always good to get as many voices heard as possible, and then you have like you have some relativity between them. You can see the patterns. I was a sociology major, and looking at patterns, that's kind of part of sociology science and political science. That was my wheelhouse. But I think it's really cool when you actually start to dive into that, because then you have some understanding of the world. It's like you find that you're not by yourself.
Right.
It's like it's a songwriter when we put a song out and then people own it, they start to realize like, oh, I felt that feeling. And then they feel like, oh, I can be allowed a permission structure to actually feel that.
Right. Very good. It's important, isn't it?
Yeah. I think so you're allowing people to have this permission structure to dive into spirituality and handling, like death, which is like it's always it's a hard thing in our society to kind of get your head around. Because
Well,
you're
and
harder
thank
on
goodness it's
yourself.
there. I mean, otherwise we'd be stuck here forever. Nobody wants to be stuck. We would like a beginning and an end to this experience so that we can move forward. So thank goodness for death.
Yeah, I think people thinking that they wouldn't want to die, they think they would put themselves in a really bad situation if you didn't.
Right. No, we get to die. That's awesome.
Well, because it's just 'cause I don't think you'd want to stay, and I don't know if you learn anything by staying around forever.
No, you get bored.
It's like I think it's like if you transition to the next phase, then there's a lot more room for learning and
Yes,
room for moving forward and understanding and then connection and empathy with the universe and everything in it.
that's right.
So I think that's a good way to go, and maybe that's where we stop tonight. But again, if people click on HelenGretchenJones.com, what happens when they go to that URL?
It will take them to my website. My website has information on the book. It has information about me. It has information about services that I offer, not just death doula services, but also intuitive services. And yeah, it's a great little website.
Well, that will be fully clickable. We were just live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and we'll be on all the other platforms that you can listen to or watch a podcast by tomorrow. We appreciate you being a guest on the Family Electricals podcast, and
Oh,
hope you have a great night.
thank you so much. It was my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.